Greetings, my people. Hope you guys have all been living well. For those of you who watch me regularly, you know that I'm known for one thing. Actually, two things: fumbling trains and being very behind on videos. I have literally thousands of clips on my hard drive that have yet to touch my editor. And I'm providing this context because if you look at all my recent uploads, they're almost all from footage that I filmed over a year ago. So for something to be so special that I choose to actually skip all of my year's worth of footage that I haven't touched and actually delay a video I had already put in my editor to discuss it, you better know it's something special. Now, the lore behind this mystery catch actually starts about a month and a half prior to this date. As some of y'all know, I happen to know a lot of people in a lot of different places, and one of my friends messaged me one evening to let me know that there was something that was going to be coming through my area in about a month and a half. Now, of course, I asked for IDs or anything like that, but like I said, this was a month and a half before this train did actually end up running through my area. So there was basically little to no information. It was kind of just a heads up, hey, when this does come running, just remember I told you so. And honestly, I completely forgot about this update. Brother was working at NS, living life, basically only going out trackside to see his buddy. It was simple times between me and the railroad. But then on one fateful evening, I had taken a trip up to North Georgia with a couple of my buddies, and while we were on our way to Toccoa, one of them says to me, hey, there's an extra Amtrak train running to Greenville. And I'm like, okay, why on earth would I care about Amtrak? And then he says, but it's not hauling Amtrak cars. What? Now, as you can imagine, I'm confused, but then he shows me an image of some of the cars that are set to supposedly be running through my area.
Excuse me? Incarnation?
Oh my God. Wait, no way.
This is impossible.
I can't believe this.
And I am literally flabbergasted. And of course, I'm asking, what is this? How did this happen? Why is it running through my area? And then I suddenly remembered the update that my friend had given me a month and a half earlier. He was exactly right in what exactly was running. And now that it was soon to be arriving, I was able to start gathering intel on what this special move happened to be. This special train, my friends, was part of a charter purchased by the Mumford & Sons band for the Railroad Revival Tour. Now, for context, for those of you who don't know what any of this means, Mumford & Sons is an English folk rock band, and they happen to have a tour scheduled in August on the east side of the United States. The first part was New Orleans, then Simpsonville, South Carolina, then Richmond, Virginia, and ending up all the way in Burlington, Vermont. And in order to get to these locations, this band decided to not just drive on buses, but actually have a railroad revival tour where they would charter or temporarily lease a bunch of old passenger cars to be used as their main mode of transportation and to arrive at their spots in style, while also giving a sight for anyone who would happen to see them on their way between tour spots. Now, of course, some of you may be thinking, why would this band do this? The friend who initially told me about this train and actually worked with one of the organizations that had to do with the insurance and the assembly of some of these cars, he literally told me that they're British and they have money. And believe it or not, this is actually not the first time that they did this. There was another railroad revival tour train that ran back in 2011.
Sensational.
Regardless of why they really decided to do this, I was not going to complain. In an era where special passenger excursions have been forgotten, and most cool trains with people are either on museums, short lines, or on the class ones when the normal trains break down, this was a more than welcome change to the norm. Now, of course, the next question following this revelation of who exactly is behind this train and why is, where on earth did all these cars come from? So a little bit of context, as some of you may know, there used to be a lot more railroads that ran in the United States, and these railroads ran passenger services individually. Of course, as mergers came along and passenger service became a lot less profitable, the volume and diversity of passenger service across the US began to dwindle before it eventually got assumed by the government and led to the birth of Amtrak. Amtrak. With Amtrak being a government entity, all their trains were standard, it has unfortunately meant that a lot of the colors and the individual designs that were accustomed to the individual passenger services eventually started to die out. Different groups and historical societies and stuff were able to buy out some of these cars before they were scrapped, and some of these cars actually got restored to serviceable condition and are actively available for people who have enough money to pay for a charter with these cars, where they are temporarily used by the buyer before they are returned back to the original owner. Mumford & Sons, of course, is the entity that's chartering these cars, and these cars have come from 8 different organizations: Rail Exco, LA Rail, Web Rail, Adios Rail, the DC chapter of the National Railroad Historical Society, Railroading Heritage of Midwest America, Northern Sky Rail Charters, and Patrick Henry Creative Promotions. And from these 8 different groups, 13 different passenger cars from an era long ago have been assembled for this rotation of the Railroad Revival Tour. We have the Caritas, the Minnesota River, the Pacific Sands, the Pacific Union, the Pacific Island, the Superdome, the White Bear Lake, the Dover Harbor, the Evelyn A. Henry, the Santa Fe, the Northern Dreams, the Northern Sky, and the Bella Vista. with Amtrak being the primary passenger mover of the United States. Once the charter itself was finalized, a form had to be submitted to Amtrak to have these cars moved by tagging them on the end of regularly scheduled passenger trains and slowly but surely assemble them into the final consist in New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, as for who exactly was running this train, the crew running this train was from Amtrak, which had labeled this train as 892, but when it was on Norfolk Southern rails, it was labeled as 050, which was originally rumored to be led by Amtrak 301 and 160, incredible, adding even more colors to this already insane rainbow consist. And whoever said that was definitely on some bull, because that did not happen. Though the power did get swapped in between different trips, the entire time this train was led by 2 regular Amtrak P-42s, which was a little disappointing, but I mean, at the end of the day, the real specialty is in the train itself and not even in the engines. And for those of you who saw what happened to 301 when it was on the Crescent, let's just say it was a good thing it was not leading this train. And so, with the news of this insane Amtrak train, with this insane array of passenger coaches soon to be coming through my area, and I had no work, I knew there was no way I was gonna miss this. So I made my journey to foreign territory and found myself in Villa Rica, Georgia. Currently, we are on the Norfolk Southern East End, where Amtrak 892/NS050 would be running in order to make its way towards Atlanta for a crew change as it sprints up to Simpsonville, South Carolina for today's show. Of course, however, Amtrak does not own their rails. They were running on Norfolk Southern trackage, and Norfolk Southern had regularly scheduled trains that were still running in the area. Upon coming here, I found out that I basically missed the regular Amtrak by about 5 minutes, but that's Amtrak, I really could not care less. And on my way here, I also happened to see a high railer, and off in the distance, I noticed that some signals were activated, but this is because there was some maintainer doing some work. Fortunately, despite missing Amtrak, lined right behind it was Norfolk Southern 191. So from this high vantage point, I decided to move down towards the level of the rails, where we could see that crossing still blinking from the maintainer's work, a lot of the old structures that still sit inside the city, and the old Southern signals that make this place a popular spot for people who like to take photos. Nice. Never mind all this infrastructure though, the real reason we've come down here is for Norfolk Southern 191, which fortunately announced its presence and came rounding this long curve within 5 minutes of me moving down here. There happened to be one more train that was running in front of today's special prize, Norfolk Southern 28J on its way to Inman Yard. So with 191 gone, I would have a little bit of waiting to do here. And in the midst of me waiting here, I was noticing an unusual trend.
What do you mean by that?
Trucks getting stopped on this crossing. The truck that we're looking at right now literally ran into the telephone pole and almost got stalled onto the rails right here. I was dead about to call the blue sign and tell them that there was something stopped on the rails. But fortunately, this truck driver, albeit roughly, was able to navigate the curb and cross the track safely without any incident or any more damage to the trailer. And then not even 10 minutes later, another truck stopped on the tracks.
Oh my God.
And this time it was in front of cops. I'm thinking to myself like, officer, don't y'all got tickets for a reason, bro?
No.
And it wasn't just one cop, it was 2.
Unredeemable.
This twin is literally sitting at this light watching this truck stopped on active tracks and not doing nothing.
Serve zero purpose.
Like, come on, 12, we gotta lock in, bro. Anyways, 20 minutes after this truck tomfoolery, the trains finally came back to the rails, as Norfolk Southern 28J abruptly came blasting through the city. As NS-28J continues trudging through the city, I would quickly leave my spot. I did not care about the rest of this train. I knew that it was going to be all domestic containers and maybe a DPU, which did end up shortly passing after I left. More important to me than this train was the fact that NS-050 was running literally right behind it. They were trying to get this thing into Atlanta as soon as possible. And I was going to make sure that I was going to catch 050 from that vantage point that I'd first come across when I'd come into Villa Rica. So it would be a little bit of a wait before the tail end of this train passed. Finally, the gates cleared, and I would find myself not even 10 minutes later hearing the sound of an Amtrak horn blaring off in the distance, and at last seeing the Railroad Revival Tour train navigating this curb as it heads towards Atlanta. Y'all know me, a train this special, there is no way that I'm not going to try to get as much footage of this thing as I can. As soon as it left this curve, the chase would commence. I had actually watched this train navigate this curve next to the guy who had given me the heads up about this train passing by a month and a half earlier. Unfortunately, he was more familiar with this NS trackage than I was, and so I would find myself following him and seeing this 050 off in the distance before coming across another price that I had had on this line. With a train as special as this and also being led by Amtrak, I was really expecting them to go faster, but I'm assuming because 28J was in front of them, they really weren't pushing more than 35 to 40 miles per hour, which let me pretty quickly catch up to them, at least as much as I could, as they continued running the East End and pushing towards their crew change in Atlanta. After getting stopped here by some traffic, believe it or not, the train actually also stopped, and I legitimately have no idea why, because after passing them stopped and trying to find another spot, 5 minutes later, I saw the headlights on the rails and pulled over as quickly as I could at this scuffed crossing, trying to get another shot. Currently we're in Lithia Springs, which is pretty close to Austell, where the East End merges with the North End. It signals the final leg of this train's journey before its crew change. So I was convinced I was not going to get any more footage of this train before it hit Atlanta. But then believe it or not, it stopped again. In order for 050 to continue on its journey, it would have to wait for the North End tracks to be cleared. So when I had passed by this train and seen it stopped, I was pretty certain that there was going to be something else running by pretty quickly. And not even a minute later, I would find out exactly what that something was. Norfolk Southern 18E, bringing empty auto racks on its way up to Princeton, Indiana. And believe it or not, this wasn't the only traffic that was in the area. That 28J that we had seen was actually working in the All-Star area, which required them to drop off a cut of cars in Mableton, Georgia. And this would mean that the double track line through that area would only be open for one train because 28J would be occupying one of those tracks. And with more north end traffic coming, I decided to stop off in Mableton, Georgia to catch the last train that the Railroad Revival Tour would have to be waiting for before it would proceed towards Atlanta. Norfolk Southern 370, bringing manifest loads on its way to Chattanooga. With 370 being gone and 28J being a train that I've already seen, I pushed forward to the last spot that I really wanted to get before this train hit Atlanta. CP Nickajack, where I would get yet another shot of a much more extended S-curve as this train began racing much faster than before on its way towards Atlanta. This would be the last shot of the train that I got on the north end, but as I mentioned, the train was going up towards Atlanta so that it could actually take the Greenville district on its way up to Simpsonville, South Carolina. And thus I knew I would be able to get one more shot of this train racing as it tries to make up time to bring the band to tonight's show. So I would find myself back on home rails, missing Norfolk Southern 154 and 153 within like 5 minutes, and I really could not have cared less. Unfortunately, with that little side quest having failed, I knew of one more spot that would be a perfect way for me to close off this chase of this incredible train. With this train now racing up to South Carolina with nothing else in front of it and me being pretty much at home, I decided I would end the chase here. Very satisfied with the shots I had gotten and being very pleased that I was even able to witness probably the coolest train that has ran these rails in the past 15 years. Though my chase of this train would be over, this thing was definitely not out of the limelight. As I mentioned before, the last spot on this tour was in Burlington, Vermont. So as you can imagine, there were hundreds of people in between where I was now in Vermont that would all capture this insane contest on its way up to its final destination. As for me though, I got what I wanted, and plus there was something else special that was coming on these rails that would be arriving later in the evening for me to see. Not for you to see though. Yep, that is staying in the backlogs. Regardless, my friends, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time, God bless. I will see you soon out on the high iron.